Howdy. This feels so good to be back in Aggieland. I just want to say that. So thank you for being here. So I'm going to be very transparent, and I need an interactive audience. So first of all, raise your hand if you've ever failed anything. I'm in the right room. Okay, raise your hand if you've ever Q-dropped something. Yes, I'm liking it. Okay. All right, now raise your hand if you wish you would have Q-dropped something but you didn't. Thank you. Thank you for being honest. But can I be honest with you all tonight? I was absolutely terrified to go to Texas A&M, absolutely terrified. I come from a small hometown of Lancaster, Texas, with about 39,000 people. If you were to take my entire town, you could fit it in Kyle Field 3 times. So coming here was it was scary for me, and I was honestly told that I should look for another school. My guidance counselor in high school told me that Texas A&M was too big. You need to look for another school that fits you. You should probably go to a historically black university or go to a 2-year university because they look like you and it better fits you. And that didn't quite sit well with me. And my dad took me on a visit to College Station. He took me to Texas A&M, and I saw that rec center, and I'm like, I'm sold. Like, I'm going here. I have to go here, and I don't care what you say because this is where I want to go. I wanted to go to a Big 12 school. It was a Big 12 school then, and I knew I wanted to go here. So I applied here, and I was accepted. And I started my freshman year here at Texas A&M, and I did horrible. I used all my Q drops in my first year, okay? And I'll tell you all those classes later on if I remember. But I wasn't doing well, and I remember telling myself, what are you doing here? You know, why did you even come? Because you're not gonna make it, and you're not doing well in classes. And I remember thinking to myself, I made a mistake, and maybe my guidance counselor was right. But I buckled down. I learned the value of study groups. I depended on my fellow Aggies. We worked together, and before you know it, I was doing better in class. I was doing better in all my classes. I changed my major for meteorology, so that was a good thing, because I wasn't good in calculus. But then I noticed that I was doing a lot better in classes. I made it to my sophomore year, made it to my junior year, got my Aggie ring. I had the most epic ring dunk. I do have pictures of that, but I will not show those here, because they're inappropriate. And before you know it, I was standing outside of Reed Arena with my family graduating, and I felt on top of the world. So after graduation, of course, you have to do something, right? So I knew I wanted to be a nurse, right out the jump. And I actually took a detour, and I decided to go to Texas A&M Health Science Center to get my master's in healthcare administration. Now, going into healthcare administration was completely left field because it was more of a business thing, and I was more of a health science major. So a lot of the things that I studied were business finance and everything, and finance was foreign to me. I was in a class of mostly white male. I was one of the only African-American women in that cohort, and I got a C in my first finance class. Now, to get a C in grad school meant that you probably were not going to get a fellowship, because in order to get out of that program that I was in, you had to get what was called an administrative fellowship, where the C-suite staff takes you on, and they basically teach you how to run a hospital. So all of my classmates were coming back and telling me how they went on these interviews, and they were at the top tiers of their classes, and all this other stuff, and I'm thinking, should I even apply? Like, I got a C in finance, and I don't know if I should. But I did. I applied to 3 hospitals on the East Coast. 2 of those hospitals said no, but 1 of those hospitals said yes. And I started my administrative residency in Greenville, North Carolina, where I now reside. So, starting this residency, first of all, I had to move from Texas to North Carolina. Let me tell you, I did not like it because they do not have a Whataburger there, okay? And they do not have chopped beef barbecue, just pork. I know, right? It's horrible. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm already not really liking this place, but I loved what I did. I loved working with widgets. I loved strategic planning and marketing. It was right up my alley, but I was missing the people factor of being a nurse. And I knew that being a nurse was what I wanted to do. So I went to my mentor, who was the chief nursing officer of the hospital where I was working, And I told her, I said, Linda, her name's Linda Hoffler, I said, I really want to go back to nursing school. I really do. And she supported me. She said, if you want to go back to nursing school, do it. Now, the rest of my colleagues that I talked to thought that this was the most dumbest thing that you could ever do, because a lot of nurses go to grad school to basically get where I was already. I was already managing. I was already in a role. I had a nice salary. And what I was doing was basically saying that I'm going to leave my salary to go back to school to be a student at the same organization I manage people. But I did it anyway. And I applied to nursing school, and I got in. Same ID badge, different role. So I went from a manager to a student, so you could probably understand how that was not only humbling, but weird. So nursing school was everything I dreamed it would be. I wasn't out of my league. I felt like I am supposed to be here. This is perfect. I understand the curriculum. I understand the human body. I understand anatomy and physiology. Like, this is perfect. Everything was going well. It was a 2-year accelerated program, so it meant that everything that happened in this time was basically full speed. So you really had to be on your guns. And I was doing well in class, and I made it all the way to my clinicals. And I thought clinicals was going great. My patients loved me. I was given the right medications. I was doing my nursing diagnosis. And towards the end of that year, it was time for graduation once you finished your clinical. And I had a professor who bullied me on the floor. She racially profiled me. She was really rude, and even my classmates noticed that she was being really weird towards me. And she brought me into her office on the last day of class after I finished all the clinicals. She sat me down, and she said, I don't think you're fit to be a nurse. And you get an F in clinicals. Yeah, this was my first F I ever got in my entire college career. And to get an F in nursing school at this point, especially in clinicals for a pass-fail grade, because you know if it's a pass-fail grade and you fail it, you were literally doing nothing, or you were negligent, or you killed a patient, which I did none of those. So to fail at this point meant that I got kicked out of school. And I was kicked out of school, and I felt like my heart jumped out of my chest. I was miserable, I was devastated, I was depressed, I was hurt, I was angry. I took it to the counselor before all of this had happened. Nothing was done about it. I took it all the way up to the dean's office, and the professor was later fired, but I was not reinstated in school. And I watched my entire class graduate. So at this point, I have no job because I left it to go to nursing school. And I had no money because I was depending on financial aid to be in school. So what do you do in this situation after you failed? I did what I knew how to do, which was work out. So I said, if I'm going to be out of school and kicked out, I'm going to start a boot camp, and I'm just going to tell people to come work out with me, because that's all I know how to do right now, and that's the only thing that would get me out of this slump, is working out. So I used my last $180 in my account, and I paid my graphic designer to make this flyer to put out for my boot camp. And he charged me $175 for it, so I only have $5 left. But I put this flyer out, and I said, we'll hope for the best, and whoever comes, comes. And this is what happened when I did that. So many people came to that boot camp, that one boot camp, that it changed everything. They paid my entire expenses for that year. And it just kept growing, and it kept growing, and it kept growing, which was later the inception of my business, Melt Fitness Studio. Now, before I get to that point, I just want to say that I still knew I was supposed to be a nurse. I knew that from the bottom of my heart. And I swallowed my pride, and I went back to my mentor, Linda Hoffler, and I told her, this is what happened. I got kicked out of school. It was unfair. And she knew about the story leading up to it. So she told me, I'm going to introduce you to someone. And that someone was Dr. Sharon Sarvey at the Barton College. She is the dean of the School of Nursing. And she emailed me and she said, hey, come have coffee with me, bring your transcripts and your grades and all your work. So I did. And she sat down with me, She looked over all of my information and she said, there's no reason why you shouldn't be a nurse. Whataburger shirt. And she sat down with me. She said, there's no reason you should be a nurse. And I really, really, really would like it if you joined our program, and I want to see you be a nurse. And that was music to my ears. I was reinstated back in school, and she was able to get me out within a year's time because all of my grades had transferred. So not only was that music to my ears, but the other music to my ears was my husband asking me to marry him that very same year. And he supported me through all of this as well. That same year, I was able to use that C in finance to get really good at it. Got really good at finance, and I wrote a business grant, used my pro formas that I learned in finance, and I did some financial forecasting to write a business grant, which we later run to open up our facility in Uptown Greenville, which is one of the happening places right now. Prime real estate, everybody's there. And that very following year, we went on to win Business of the Year. And all of this happened out of failure. Every single thing happened out of failure. And I started to realize that my life kind of revolves around failure, and I like it, right? I like it. So these are the failures in my life. I'm a personal trainer, right? I know people don't like personal trainers. Y'all don't like it because we tell you what to do, we tell you what to eat, we work your muscles to failure, we tell you to keep pumping, keep going, and you have nothing else left to give. And all of a sudden, you're like, oh, I hate you. But my muscles are looking good. Like, it's this beautiful physique that comes out of it, and that's the beautiful thing that comes out of muscle failure. It's working those muscles until the glycogen stores are gone, and you break them down, and then you drink that protein, and you build them back up. And that's a beautiful thing. And with failure, with all of my clients, we've been able to basically have our 5-year anniversary back in May. We've had several people get off diabetic and hypertension medications. We've been able to train over 300 clients to date. And that's what happens with muscle failure. But my life also revolves around another failure, which is organ failure. So as a nurse, I see patients come in with basically a clean bill of health. There's nothing wrong with them until all of a sudden you see abnormal labs go up. You see the kidneys doing things that kidneys aren't supposed to do. You see the heart doing things that the heart isn't supposed to do. And then you see other organs compensating for things. And it's weird, but it's beautiful at the same time because everything that the heart and the kidneys and all the organs do is to sustain your life. Your body is designed to keep you alive. But this really hit home for me a month ago with my dad. So my dad has never had any type of illnesses or anything like that. You know, he's always been pretty much healthy. And I went home one day and he was coughing, and I'm like, that cough just doesn't sound right. And as a nurse, I know that cough. Like, I've seen it, I've heard it, said, that doesn't sound right. You need to go get yourself checked. I walked outside, I saw his grass was high, and that's not like him. So it turns out my dad was diagnosed with aortic insufficiency. He needed a brand new descending aorta, brand new aortic valve, and his artery was 50% occluded, which is just a bunch of nursing jargon and clinical jargon to say that his heart was failing. And this is the type of failure that I don't want to see. And I always tell my clients that the muscle is a heart. The heart is a muscle. So it is the only muscle that you do not want getting bigger. It's the only muscle that you do not want to overexert. And in this case, this was happening. But in this time that he was sick, I was able to be his advocate. I was able to look at those labs and understand what was going on. And I thought to myself, if I had stopped when I got kicked out, when she told me I wasn't fit to be a nurse, I couldn't be there for him. It was the time that I remembered my why. So if you don't remember anything from this speech, I want you to know, and I want you to remember, that the most powerful thing you can know is your why. Why do you do what you do? Why are you here right now? Why are you going to this school? What classes have you failed that you think counts you out? Because it does not define you. You have to work through your failures, and you have to embrace those barriers because it is what makes you who you are. And sometimes you don't even know why you're doing something until that why shows up, and you don't know when it'll show up. For me, it showed up a month ago, and we're still going through things with cardiac rehab, but I'm happy, and I'm so glad that I know my why. So I know we're an Aggie network, and I know that you have questions, and I know that there are things that you go through, but if you ever have any questions, or if you ever need to reach out to someone who needs to know, who you want to know what to do, or in this situation, feel free to reach out to me, because I understand what you're going through, and I understand that it can be very, very difficult. So with that said, I'd like to thank you, and I would like you to look at your neighbor and say, "Fell beautifully." Does that sound weird? I know. It sounds weird, but do it. Thank you. I'm Lyndsey.